Hey guys, how's it going? It's Chris here, author of the Vengeance series over on vengeancebooks.com. Buckle in, because this is a long video, as you can probably tell. I have no idea how long this is going to be, but judging by what I just scrolled through, I'm going to be here for a little bit, and I'm going to get very tired. I'm going to probably be reading this for like an hour. Today we're going to be looking over the Book 2 roadmap revision document that I have. Now, I think this was, I honestly don't remember. This was like, the date on the document is 2020. It's about June 9th, 2020, roughly. And so I don't know when I started doing like the main, you know, head down, we're writing book 2. But I think this was one of the last revisions that I did before getting into that and before like actually getting to the writing where the story evolves past my roadmap kind of thing. As I'm writing, it changes as I go based on the scenes where I am. That happens. Ooh, that happens with every book. So this was, I believe, my original start to finish plan for book 2. I say original loosely because who knows how many times before, who knows what the document looked like before I started doing my writing. And we're going to read this from beginning to end. So this is part 1, recovery, redemption, reintroduction. Again, so this is me blueprinting everything. So the book starts with Tansu dreaming about walking with her dad, which is a scene I do believe we get to see. Yeah, we do. I wanted to keep that in. So the book was supposed to start there, eventually leading into Kim on the road or Kim in the road where they kind of cross paths and it turns into a nightmare. She wakes from that nightmare in the hospital where her mom is by her bedside. They share a memory of that heavy winter and the nurse comes in, the winter where Tansu was shoveling for her dad. Instead of her funeral, Kim's funeral being so soon, push it back a day and allow Tansu to spend another full day in bed, and she would be leaving that night, which is not how that worked. She stayed another night and left in the morning, I believe. It's been a while since I have gone through book 2. This is where Stacy surprises her with a visit. Tansu asks her mom to leave so they can talk, and when alone, Tansu is defensive and confused by her manners and kindness. Stacy says she won't be able to attend the funeral tomorrow, which infuriates Tansu, claiming that she spent her whole life treating her like garbage, and now that she's dead, she can't even give her the respect by showing up. Sorry, I'm going to resize this. Stacy quietly responds, not my whole life, in which she gets their history and garners much-needed sympathy for her character. So again, this is me outlining for myself what I want to be covering in those scenes. So it's like summarizing. By the end, she repeats she can't make it because of shame. Tansu says if that's the case and if everything's true, then Kim would want her to show up, despite all that. Before Stacy leaves, Tansu asks for Joey's phone number. She gives it but says good luck reaching him. Nobody's heard from him since it happened. She leaves and Tansu tries calling but no one answers. Cut to the funeral opening. So we go straight from the hospital that night to the funeral. We just kind of jump to that point where she sees Stacy has indeed joined the crowd and sees Joey in the distance by himself. Reference what has already been written for additional context and accuracy. I don't know what I was saying there. I think I already had some notes in the document about that scene, like just reference what I'm talking about there for whatever. Reference what has already been written. I don't think I'm talking about like what Joey looks like at the moment, how he would be feeling, like reference stuff from book 1 for context and accuracy. That day after the funeral, she gets home. She spends time with her mom, cleaning and redressing her wounds. Some more simple stuff happens at home, monotonous and depressing. Tells her mom she wants to go back to school, but she denies her. Then she asks if she can visit Kim tomorrow. She tried to call Joey, but gets his mom instead. That night, she has a horrible nightmare and wakes to find Ken in her bedroom. This is where things really are different. She flips out and yells for her mom, to which they respond, I guess Chrism is there too, I didn't say that. They respond that she won't hear her. They've put up a barrier. So essentially, they just like plop themselves in the room, and maybe it's saying they as in Ken and Macro, I don't know yet, that they put up like almost like a little psychic sound barrier kind of just containing them. Or think of it like they're talking in her dream or something like that. They're telekinetically talking or whatever. She asks what they want, afraid. Immediately, Chrism's there. Chrism reveals herself and Tansu starts to settle down a little. Ken, quirky, complains, you didn't even give me a chance. Chrism responds, I do not like seeing her afraid. So now Tansu is really confused and asks what's going on, still struggling with the pain. Chrism starts by saying first that she's happy Tansu is doing okay. Second, that they came for help. Tansu is really confused, almost laughing at the joke. Ken adds, "We wish we were joking, but we really do need you. If it wasn't important, we wouldn't be here." She starts to get annoyed, telling them she doesn't want anything to do with them. Kim's dead because of all this, and as far as she's concerned, whatever trouble they're in is their own mess to clean up. Ken gets a little annoyed, but Chrism hushes him, then addresses her. If we are left to this mess alone, I'm afraid the problem will be yours sooner or later." Tansu still ignores them, getting emotional. She doesn't trust them, but Chrism gives her a yearning look before leaving with a saddened, "Please, you may be our only hope," and then the chapter ends. So already there's a... Sorry, I just had to drink something. Already there is a huge discrepancy in the timeline of events. I don't know if discrepancy is the right word for that. But yeah, so the way it unfolds in book 2 is, we don't see Ken and them until later when she's sitting on the couch after her mom leaves and they talk to her, saying generally the same thing. But yeah, it's already the pacing for what's going on. It's a little bit different. So, next chapter, we start with her at the dining room table trying to do some schoolwork. Her mom is outside doing chores, watering the flowers and vacuuming out her car. The pain she's in makes it hard for her to focus, and she keeps getting flashbacks to that day. She thinks she hears Kim's voice. Dropping the pencil, she looks to the living room and wonders what would have happened if they didn't go on that walk, which leads her to Chrism, unsure if that was even real in the first place or if it was a dream. But that gets her thinking and curious. If they're telling the truth and exactly what could be going on, if they're telling the truth, what exactly could be going on, whatever I was saying there, what would be required of her. Later in that afternoon, she goes to the graveyard with a photo of Kim on the rock that she took in book 1 and finds Joey already there, his hat removed and placed in front of the stone. He notices her behind him and turns, looking awful, and she says she'll come back later. He says it's fine. She speaks with him, the two recalling memories, all the while Tansu is thinking about what Chrism said. He says how he wakes up every day expecting to hear from her. Every day it's something new he wants to say, but he can't. He then brings up what the news said happened. Guy with the knife attacked, and they ran into the woods to escape, but he caught up. She nods along, not showing any emotions. I don't remember, what did I say was the canon, that it was an animal attack? I think animal attack is what I went with. Yeah, at first it was like they got attacked by just like a deranged guy. He's watching her as he retells the story, and he can tell by her reaction that it's all bullshit, that he's just saying it. She's like, yeah, if it was real, she would have had like a more emotional reaction, but she knows it's a lie. She asks how he can be so sure, because he says it's bullshit. He says because he saw the photos of her body, so that was still the same, explaining that she came to him before, telling him it wasn't safe but refused to talk about it. She was scared, and he never sees her scared. Tansu says she doesn't know what to say, and he retorts by saying, "Just tell me the truth," because he can't live like this. She refuses to give details, just stays quiet. He gets fed up and is about to stomp off when she calls out to him. She says if he knew the truth, if he knew her story, then he might hate her. "I did," she says. He snickers, fighting tears. "After all we've been through, there's nothing that girl could have done to make me hate her." Tansu looks to him, and he lets silence permeate before saying, "You loved her." Before she says, "You loved her," and he turns away. She adds, "The truth won't make him feel better." He looks so frustrated, but just stands there. She hobbles over to him and stops, then hands over the photo of Kim and leaves. That's emotional. I'm thinking I haven't read book 2 in a little bit, and I haven't been in that scene for a couple years now. So just like, man, I just realized I'm going to have to do that as the audiobook, and that's going to be stressful. Whew. But, yeah, that's some... Yeah. So then that chapter ends, and now we're on part 2. And it's not like the book wasn't going to be split into these parts, but that's just me trying to keep track of, like, that's what this chunk is about, that's what this chunk is about, so I could keep it organized in my brain. So part 2, request, acceptance, and the end approaches. I don't know how organized all this is going to be, by the way. When Tansu arrives there, she at some point arrives there. Okay, so this is a note that's supposed to be a little bit further down, so we're ignoring that. That night, so this was put here, and this was like an afterthought as I was putting this in there. Oh, I need to write this down, and I need to remember that. So that night, she's lying in bed thinking it over when she decides to at least hear them out. She sneaks out to her mom's car to go to Kim's, but finds Chrism standing outside. Sneaks out to take her mom's car. So instead, she was going to leave to go to Kim's house, because I think in that conversation they were alluding to meet them or to go to Kim's house to talk. or whatever. I think I haven't yet figured out why. I wanted it to be at Kim's house for a myriad of reasons. I wanted it because Tansu's never been there. She needed to kind of get further context as to like the environment there and what had happened to piece together stuff. And so yeah, so for some whatever reason, they wanted her. I needed her to go to Kim's. I don't think I said it yet in that. So she goes to take her mom's car to go to Kim's, but finds Chrism already standing outside. Chrism greets her kindly, though monotone. Tansu still seems unsure, but says she'll hear what they have to say, but won't promise anything. Chrism says that she must come with her now. Ken is waiting. Tansu asks to where. Then Chrism sprouts her disheveled wings and brings Tansu to Kim's. So she just flies her to Kim's, I guess. And I still thought about having that be the thing, just to kind of like, remind the reader that like, oh yeah, Chrism's got like fucking god power, but they're also fucked up god power. But instead I just had her fucking rift her over there. There they meet up with Kent, who appears sickly still. Once together in the driveway, Tansu is awestruck by Kim's house, says this is the first time she's been here. They then inform her that they need her to be a host for Alice, so they just tell her straight up. Obviously taken aback by this, she rejects the idea, but they push and say that Alice is the key to survival. Without her, they have already lost. She asks what makes her so special. Isn't Chrism supposed to be all-powerful? She responds by saying with Sin's power, no threat could stand in their way. However, the amount of innocent blood on her human soul restricts what she is able to conjure, so they are outmatched. I think, yeah, so this must have, I'm not sure, who knows what I say later on, but this might have been before I decided that Mundy's energy, Mundy's madness would be taking over because of the dirty stains on her soul. But instead, right here, I was just saying, like, she can't access the power because the blood on her soul refuses to cooperate. So yeah, they're outmatched. The power Alice has inside of her is vast, and her potential is astounding. They need her to stand with them. Tansu isn't fully convinced and says that's all whatever, but why do they need her? Tansu. Ken says because Alice needs a host. She needs to feed and reawaken her power. Tansu repeats, feed? What do you mean by that? Ken says it means you will have to take her in you. After that, they will move Alice to another body, hiding the fact that she has to kill. Even though they said feed, but Tansu doesn't know what that means. Tansu questions, is that all? Ken looks to Chrism with a shameful stare and hides his expression. Chrism says yes. Tansu briefly considers and says, okay, she'll help. After that, they have Tansu go inside alone, instructing her to go upstairs and enter the bathroom. She asks why they can't go in with her, and Chrism says that Alice is there, though she isn't awake. Her instinct will react volatile if she senses either of them too close. They don't want to agitate her subconsciously. Chrism then attaches a sigil to Tansu's hand, a magical seal designed by Ken to siphon the anima from where it's stored. She then goes inside and Tansu gets to experience Kim's house. She starts emulating the pains Kim endured, feeling a sharp pain in her chin, then pulling at her hair, looking to the balcony and feeling the ache in her back. So many pains and emotions overload her. She doesn't realize that as she's walking across the floor that her face is wet with tears. After enduring so many visions and voices, she touches the broken mirror in the bathroom and absorbs Alice. She lashes out in the bathroom and experiences Alice waking up, living through moments of Kim's past and some of the ways she suffered and fought, including the time she almost killed Tansu and memories of her mom, Rachel. She turns to the door, and Chrism and Macro are there. Alice sees Ken through Tansu's eyes and triggers a transformation. Alice, with Tansu, has straight, stringier hair that falls over her eyes with a part down the middle, and her freckles turn into vertical comma streaks. Blinded by hunger and confusion, she attacks Ken, who transforms to Macro to defend himself. Chrism takes the opportunity to slip into the shadows, and Macro, in a panic, yells out, "Oh sure, I'll just subdue her, no problem," sarcastically. But Alice is about to jab her claws into Macro's face. Her nails are intercepted by a powerful tunnel of wind that spawns from nowhere, flipping their hair all around. She's locked in place by this wind. As Chrism reveals herself, this is after they've been fighting for a second, and as she's about to, they've been fighting for a couple minutes at that point, and Macro is trying to subdue her. Alice is about to get basically a killing blow, and then is caught by a torrent of wind. As Chrism reveals herself, Alice starts to lower her aggression, speaking for the first time and asking what's going on. Chrism first asks what she remembers, and Alice recalls a vague memory of being pulled, shrunken down to a speck, and hurtled down a violent tunnel until everything went dark. Chrism starts to explain where she is and what happened, saying she has been revived with Tanzu as her new host. It takes her some time to cement herself in this reality and eventually asks Magcrow if they've met after she feels a little more comfortable. He says, sort of. Magcrow asks if Tanzu is okay in there. Alice responds and says she's in a box, confused. She will let her out. Tanzu is released from the internal prison and can't quite find a balance, considering she exists but can't move anything. Chrism explains the council is coming to reclaim Sin's divine power, but they can't have it at any cost. Alice still asks why they kept her alive. Chrism says they will need her help, besides death wasn't a deserved fate for either of them, and Alice gets quiet, saying they should have saved Kim instead. That response impacts Tanzu inside. Alice almost calls, this is just a little note for myself to include somewhere, Alice almost calls Tanzu Kim during their time together, but stops herself part way and continues to kid. I don't know if I ever included that, but I do know Alice calls her kid a bunch of times, which is an homage to this idea that she always wants to say Kim, but ends up saying kid instead. Chrism releases the wind. Magcrow says her strength is invaluable. Even with Chrism having Sin's divine power, won't be enough. They're just saying all that for Alice again. Alice asks what they mean by that. Chrism says she is restricted, the innocent blood. She explains this, and this is in case I wanted to have them explain that to Tanzu or Alice. It depends on which part I wanted that explanation to come in. Oh my god, that's a big block of text. When Alice to be utilized, having murdered so many innocent people in her life, the divine power will not cooperate with her will. Alice scoffs, commenting how none of them are clean. He looks to her, smirking, and says, well, I wouldn't say that. At this point, Chrism senses the Tuffle. She calls for them to step out, and four Tuffle oblige. I went a little fast. So Alice scoffs, commenting how none of them are clean, her, Chrism, or Magcrow. And Magcrow looks to her, smirking, and says, I wouldn't say that, because he knows that Kel was a dirty little diddler. So he's aware that Alice's soul is, while not perfectly squeaky clean, is as clean as it could possibly be with her level of strength. So then Chrism senses the Tuffle. She tells them all to get the fuck out here, exiting Alex's room. Ken is like, whoa, didn't even smell him, which I think is a line I still kept in there. She asks what they're doing here, and they reply, the leak led them here. Its toxic fumes are slowing their animal breakage. They also say they heard what they were talking about and how with Sin dead, then the crown is up for grabs. Two Tuffle charge Chrism, and Alice readies herself, feeling weak and sluggish. The third chooses to attack Ken, or Magcrow, and the fourth goes for Alice. The room explodes with a surge of their combined energies. Chrism is easily able to block the first attack and catch one Tuffle by the throat and snap their neck. She just fucking no-diffs them instantly. Then, excuse me. Then she reacts to grab the other by the shirt and hoist them up. Ken makes light of the situation, blocking an attack and pushing him back, and asks how Chrism didn't sense them before. She returns the same, and he just shrugs, replying, been a long day. The Tuffle that attacks Alice knocks her through the front door, flying over the stairs and hitting the dirt driveway. He leaps out and immediately attacks her. Alice tries to defend herself, but finds it hard to cooperate with Tanzu. She endures a few hits and manages to stab him in the gut. This attack triggers him to ascend and punch her square in the face, bloodying her nose and busting her lip. The transformation wears off, and she reverts back to Tanzu, who vomits and cups the blood spilling from her nose. She is unable to defend herself and suffers a lot of powerful punches. Alice is keeping her alive by expelling her own energy, but can't hold off for long, seeing how she is in her repressed fetal stage. I do want to say real quick, if you guys hear that noise, that's just me pinching my chair, because I gotta say that in every video, because I play with my chair right here, and it's leather, so it makes noises. I'm not farting. Suddenly, an explosion of power blasts past the two of them, tearing branches from trees and throwing dirt all over the place. He turns to see Chrism in the doorway with one arm extended by her side and the other hand holding the Tuffle's head. Oh, I did keep that. Charred feathers start to push out from her skin, sharp as daggers and shimmering black. He confidently chortles, demanding she try her best. With a furious stare, she idles a moment longer. He shoots needles from the palm of his hand, which phase straight through her. In the span of a blink, she appears in front of the ascended Tuffle with her arm straight through his chest. Raises him up with blood splashing everywhere from the inside out. He combusts. That's metal. Igniting into black and red fireballs and melting away to nothing. So she just appears with her arm straight through his chest, lifts him up, and the dude just like explodes into fire and charcoal. So this already happened. Alice reverts back to Tanzu, and they black out. So essentially, they just black out. She later wakes in Ken's underground shelter on a soft bed, which has since been repaired with a large board covering the hole. So I guess yeah, so I'm just noting that for myself, that that hole that he fell through has been repaired. I wanted to note the boards. Here he has many books that are transcribed notes from Sin and Chrism. She wakes to Ken reading and asks where Chrism is. He says she made a run to Sin's place, to Sin's house, to his condo, has to repair the father gem. And I don't know if I ever went with this, the father gem. I think I just kind of went with he has ubiquitous powers to just repair all the anima and like a wave to just like heal the cracks. But at one point, I've mentioned it before, and I don't think I ever mentioned it in the main series. I think I just decided not to. There was a father anima of just one anima that like represented all the others that they were all linked to. That he would repair that, and then that would repair the others, which just doesn't make sense because the anima is alive. So in a sense. So yeah, the father gem just doesn't exist, and I did away with that. As far as I'm aware, I don't think I ever mentioned it. Now that Alice is out of isolation, she has to repair the father gem. She's also checking into your mom. Ken asks how she is doing. Ken asks how she is doing. She checks herself and finds the wounds healed as well as all of her other injuries. Then asks if she feels weird because they had to use a rift to get here and human souls do not like the rift. She says she feels fine and also asks exactly where they are. Ken shares a little bit about this place and his backstory. I gotta burp. Talking a lot, it's making me have to burp. Not wanting to be in the center of attention, he shifts focus back to her, asking how Alice is doing. Tansu tries feeling her soul, but feels a cold distance. She explains the oddness of her presence, like an itch she can't ignore that isn't entirely bothersome, but not pleasant either. Ken tells her he's sorry about Kim and all this. She asks if she knew Kim at all, and he gives an overview of how he was tasked in watching her. He saw Tansu quite often as well. Later, when Chrism returns, Tansu asks about her mom, to which she replies she is worried, scared, and confused. They're searching for her. Chrism asks about her well-being. She says she's fine again, but still weak. She then recalls what happened at Kim's house and asks what happened after she blacked out. Chrism says the Tuffle were dealt with. Tansu asks what happens next. Ken gives Chrism an awkward look and says, all you. Giving Chrism a worrisome glare, Chrism sighs through her nose and says there's still more to be done. By this point, Tansu is just homesick and terrified of dying, saying how if this is the kind of stuff Kim dealt with, she understands her a lot more now. Chrism explains they have to shave off a chunk of her soul for Alice to feed off of to unlock her hidden power, and in order to do that, she has to kill someone, a human. Tansu reels back, shocked and disturbed by her request. She almost takes it as a joke, but realizes by the tension in the room that it's clearly serious. She says there's no way she can't possibly kill. Chrism gets annoyed and with a stout temper tells her she has no choice. The only way for this to be over is to take a life. Alice gives her opinion, asking if they can just kill another Tuffle, but Chrism says no. Under normal circumstances, it is questionable whether or not claiming a Tuffle while fetal would unlock your development stages. It has never been done before. Besides, even if that would work, she cannot sense Chrism cannot sense living Tuffle anymore, which we just noticed, so she can't guarantee there are any left, and on top of that, where to find them. She then says she's aware of Tansu's purity and admires it, but this isn't an innocent life to be claimed. This is deserved. A tense pause gives Chrism space to bring forward a name, Blank, the guy who killed her dad. Hadn't thought that far ahead yet. Tansu is stunned, asking how she knows that name. Chrism says this is destiny. Tansu says absolutely not even him. So yeah, so this is, again, a lot of what I did in book 2 was keeping a lot of stuff ambiguous, and I know a lot of this was being written out for me to know what's going on and then to decide what to do with later, but, like, a lot of this, they're just being very direct with her, and she's going along with it, but, like, that didn't make sense for her character. She would be like, I ain't doing this, I'm scared, and that's scary. I'm scared of scary things, and that's a scary thing. So she's just like, I can't do this, and, so instead, in Book 2's canonical story, they're, like, hiding stuff and, like, kind of just dragging her along and making her do stuff she doesn't understand, backing her into a corner so she doesn't have a choice because they can't risk her not doing it. So when she says not even him, which then leads to Tansu recalling that what they wanted her to do, kill Blank, and both of them seem rigid, to which Chrism explains that she understands her position, but she has to consider the stakes. This is not a request to steal the life of an innocent. It is a cruel, filthy action that must be carried out with justified purpose. The act of vengeance will, Tansu interrupts, scoffing, mocking the word vengeance. Her demeanor changes to sharp but reserved. She goes into detail about how she felt when it all happened, how she never dreamed about harming him, how she, still never dreamed about hurting him. All she wanted was her dad back, not the man dead. A long pause, she continues, then again, after meeting Kim and watching her suffer, her resolve not to hate only strengthened. Now, being where she is, she can see that revenge can never bring peace. Chrism sighs and says in a hushed tone, "Peace within yourself is not the goal. I'm not asking you to do this as a way to grow and move on. I'm demanding you to kill for the sake of our survival. The Council is more powerful than you could ever believe, and their intentions are unknown as of now. If their intentions are at all similar to the first cataclysm, then our chances are practically zero. With Alice, however, we may be able to keep my divine energy away from them. It's not just for a little longer. If not just for a little longer, so you see, this isn't about you." Everyone goes silent, contemplating the gravity of the task at hand. Chrism says she'd like for Macro and Alice to spar. Ken seems okay with it, but Tansu is hesitant. Still, she's willing to give it a try. She can't quite muster the emotions needed, being so drained and depressed. They tell her to think about the killer and get angry. She says when she thinks about him, she only gets sad. Chrism seems discouraged and says not to worry, it was only a test. Then she says, "Unfortunately, we're short on time." So she gives a nod to Ken, who sighs, looking disheartened, and starts to walk towards a door. Tansu gets quiet, tense, looking between the two. Ken opens the dark closet. There's no closet in the actual thing, because why would there be a closet in a fucking concrete bunker? But I just needed some way to hide him. Instead, they put him in a big chest, and he drags out a body with a blindfold on and tape over his mouth. So classic. Tansu's heart races and asks, "What is this?" Chrism then rips the tape off, and the guy starts panting heavily, begging please. Tansu starts to get upset when the blindfold is removed. Ken and Chrism step away, opening the stairway door for light and air. They allow Tansu and the guy to talk. She does start to get angry, and he asks what's going on, but she returns with her own questions. First, confirming his identity. He begs to be let go, saying that he has a son. She doesn't believe him. She tells him his crimes, trying to get a confession, giving an exact date and location. He's distraught, but eventually comes clean, expressing the guilt and hatred he felt. It was an accident. She angrily asks why he didn't turn himself in, and he says because his son will have no one. He can't go to his mother because she's a druggie and never knew his extended family. He's all the kid has. Tansu is mad but sympathetic. Alice all the while is teasing and prodding and calling out his lies as such, trying to get her to lose it. She steps away, exiting out the doorway and basking in the fresh daylight, which obviously is not how it went. She goes out there to get away to keep Alice from transforming because she's right on the precipice of losing control. So she fucking darts outside and falls onto the grass or whatever. Ken follows her out, giving her space but staying close. At this point, Chrism drags him outside and pushes the guy forward. He falls to his knees and is chuckling in a demented way. Chrism instructs him to repeat what he just said. Tansu's chin juts out, facing him again and with new composure. He giggles, looks up to her with weirdly dilated eyes, and says some really offensive stuff about her dad and how he got away. She really starts to break down, thinking of her dad and mom and screaming. He's being influenced to lie by Chrism, but Tansu doesn't see that. This is my note for myself. This finally gives Alice an opening to break through and slash her claws across his throat. Alice really likes going for throats. Finally, Alice's power is unlocked, and Tansu is left in a fractured mental state inside Alice, who now has temporary control. Her immense surge of power explodes outward. Alice basks in the glory of resurrection and looks to Ken, cockily sneering, and reminds him of the spar. Ken looks worried and asks how Tansu is, to which Alice shrugs and says it's quiet. Ken seems upset that it came to this, but gets himself in a stance while Chrism steps off to the side. Out of nowhere, Javalt shows up by suddenly appearing by swiping a blade at Chrism's head. She senses it at the last second and dodges the swing, but is thrown back by a follow-up punch to the face. She flies back and smashes through a tree and disappears into the brush. So yeah, that's entirely different because obviously in book 2, the same circumstances generally happen, but the sky gets vermilion and dark, and then Javalt fucking descends like a dark goddess, like a demented angel, and just lands just motherfucker. Yeah, she fucking steps on the ground light as a feather. And she just tries to cut her head off instantly. She just appears, which is, both are equally badass. Ken and Alice take a stance and prepare to fight, but are discouraged when they see their opponent, a council member, staring them down with bored, conceited eyes. Sorry, I got dry spots in my throat. She holds the sword down by her side and looks at them, calling them lesser beings and suggesting they step aside. Ken and Alice refuse. Tansu inside is still in a fugue state, which is restricting Alice a little. They fight Javalt a bit, but are easily cast aside, clearly dismissing their power and trying not to kill them. But before they do too much, Chrism reinserts herself, sprouting her wings and soaring up into the sky and descending in front of Ken and Alice. They exchange a greeting, and Javalt reinforces their fears, saying they will take her back to Nexus and rip Sin's power from her. Chrism naively states that whatever they're planning will never come to fruition. This power cannot be trusted in your hands. Which is really just Mundy talking, even though I don't think I knew that at this point. They get her to divulge info about Sin and his falling, but only just enough, so we get to hear a little bit about Sin's past as Akram. This is just a quote that I wanted to say. Your power is a light bulb to the sun. Chrism fights her off, holding her own for a minute, while Ken readies a spell that would give them a chance to escape. When it's finally prepared, he shouts 7 seconds and casts a spell which entirely locks Javalt in place. Giving Chrism enough time to rip a tear in this dimension and have them all run through. They hit the floor in Sin's main chamber and gather themselves. Alice reverts back to Tansu, who's a mental mess. Ken ends up stepping out to check on Kari. The thing that gets Tansu to come back to reality is their surroundings, noticing the cage and how Chrism keeps staring at it. Details of Chrism's past and what she knows of the council are then revealed. Now we're on part 3, the ditch, Kim reveal, retrieval. Hope you're all still with me, because how long I've been going for? 32 minutes. Okay. Ken returns and says everything's fine, but now that the council is aware, time just got cut much shorter, which is a very bad sentence. Alice asks if they have any idea what the council's plan is, but Chrism just has speculation, so now they say they have to hurry on with the next step. Tansu's shoulders sink and complains, next step? When will it end? By the looks on their faces, Tansu comes to terms with the fact that they've been hiding things and dragging her along since the beginning, which they really haven't. Not in this storyline right here. Chrism then takes out the glass orb and says the next step is how we remove Alice from your body. Alice immediately recognizes the energy and even asks if that's the ditch. They nod, and after a brief discussion about it, Ken and Alice and Tansu enter the orb. Ken, Alice, and Tansu. Standing at the edge of the pool, they marvel at its design. Alice is burdened by memories of starvation in the water, feeling sick. The ditch has veins running through the ground, all connecting to smaller pools, which I made roots. Stalagmites are on the ceiling, swinging lanterns burning oil, and work tables with scrolls, tools, and books. What stands out the most are 2 tables by the ditch, long and thin, raised high with a root extending from the pool and resting on an end table between the beds by the head. One bed is empty, the other has a sheet over what appeared to be a body. Tansu is uncomfortable, but now becoming jaded to the weird themes. Alice also expresses a weird feeling, a familiar taste in the air outside of the ditch itself. Ken walks her over to the beds and points to the root, which is dipped in a small bowl containing water. He then says this is the last thing they need her to do. Lay down, and he will introduce her soul to that water. She asks why, what's in there, and Ken gets an excited smirk and says, Kimberly. Chapter ends. Tansu and Alice alike are lagging behind his words, staring with disbelief. She's feeling sick with anxiety and confusion, and asks what he means by that. He says that her soul was destined to the ditch one way or another. Even though Sin was killed and his contract's null, it was a safer bet to allow her deceased soul to rejoin the fragments already resting there, rather than try to pick up the pieces and join them together. Once she was accounted for, they placed her in her own pool, where it is now. It's her job to convince her soul to leave the ditch. Alice asked that if they can enter, why didn't they convince her already? Ken says they tried, but she won't listen. She doesn't believe they are real. Besides, even if they convinced her, there was nowhere for her soul to go. So that's obviously not how that happened. Instead, there's no bowl of water. Tansu is just like gets mentally sent in there or whatever, gets overlapped. That's why they did all this, to recover Alice, kill blank. Oh, the dad killer, dad murder guy. Kill blank to restore her power. Sorry, my brain lagged. While simultaneously shaving out Tansu's soul to play host for Kim, saving her from an undeserved fate. Then Alice says, wait, 3 souls in one body, that'd never work. He says, well, that's what we had this for. He gestures to the concealed corpse. Tansu gets a worried expression, and Ken removes the sheet, revealing it's Kim's corpse, cleaned up and lifeless. Tansu turns away, disgusted. She starts sobbing in an exhausted way, just numb to all this. Alice gets excited over the fact that she will finally, after all this time, get her own body. After a minute to process, Tansu willingly lays on the table. When Tansu is in the ditch trying to find Kim the first time, she's walking around narrow hallways, peering into misshapen rooms with odd scenes from Kim's past that she doesn't understand. She finds a trapdoor in the floor where she sees a mangled mess of body parts and hair that vaguely resemble a human shape. It notices her and crooks its body parts with disgusting shamble sounds. It mumbles, "Wait, I will stand." The body trembles but cannot, which is supposed to be representative of the original, like, I think at that point it was Nothing's energy cut off from Kim and just like cast aside, as Kim is separate to Nothing in this place. At last, she finds her sitting alone at a table in the isolated darkness. Kim is focused on a lone candle in the center of the table, the flame burning bright. Though her eyes were connected to the light, it seems as though she was looking through it, like a blind person pretending to see. Is that offensive? When Tansu tried to talk to her, Kim barely responds, saying she isn't real. Tansu explains that she is, becoming more disturbed. Kim closes her eyes and says that Tansu too will fade, just like the others. They said they would be here, waiting for her when it was all over, but they lied. They always lie. As Tansu stands in the doorway, she hears creeping from the long halls. Eventually, she is unable to convince Kim, and a bunch of arms reach out from around the hallway and start to pull at her. She's stricken with visions of headstones featuring the names of all she loves and horrible imagery. Ken has to pull her out and explains that the ditch was trying to claim her, and they'll have to try again. Part 4. Destro surprise attack. Destro surprise attack return to Kim. So yeah, this was still the original plan, was to have Destro appear, because he didn't die in book 1. And that Lyomik was lying because she is a deceiver. That's what they do. They both exit the ditch, and Chrism sees that Tansu and Alice are still together, questioning what went wrong. Tansu is visibly exhausted. Ken tells her that souls in the ditch are attempting to reach her, that and Kim is stubborn as nails. Alice gets frustrated and asks why they can't just move her into Kim's body now. It'd be better if she was on her own and ready to fight. Chrism says they would, but Tansu's body wouldn't last without something to stabilize her own soul, whether it's you or Kim. Not to mention, because they already had a piece slivered off. It's too risky. The soul could, like, collapse on itself. Not to mention, they don't know exactly how she will respond when she gets fused with the body. She may be immobilized for a time. She may not. We will just have to try again. Tansu says she needs to eat and sleep, so consults with Chrism, who instructs her to nap. Go take a nap. In a few hours, in a few hours, she is woken by Ken, who says the two of them are going to get something to eat. She gets up and is feeling more balanced now. Before leaving, they say Chrism is standing by herself, facing away and silent. Ken calls to her, saying they will be right back, but she doesn't acknowledge them. So Ken and Tansu, Macro, and Alice are just like, yeah, we're going to go get lunch. Ken makes a rift and they leave, popping out of an alley in a bustling city. I wanted to try to change up the environment a little bit and actually not have it just be like these small town areas and like these secluded locations or whatever have you. I wanted to bring it to a place with more people and also raise the stakes, because it's like, wow, look at all these people, look how busy it is. And I did do that, but in a different way. They quickly find somewhere to eat, and Tansu is going to use the bathroom. Ken says he'll just jump in line. What does she want? She asks for a burger and fries, which Tansu would never ask for. I think that, if anything, I had that in there because that's something maybe Kim would have gone for, and Alice kind of has that piece of her, that influence. So she might be, like, influencing Tansu craving a burger and fries, because otherwise Tansu wouldn't get that. She would get a fucking salad and chicken. And then she goes to the bathroom to wash up. When she steps out, she appreciates how normal everything is, wondering where exactly they are on top of that. She sees him in line and points to an empty table on the curb. She nods and saves the spot. Watching cars and people pass while chatting with Alice in her head, Ken comes back and asks how she likes New York. Her eyes go wide and says she's always wanted to go to New York. He chuckles, saying it's one of his favorite places to escape. They eat peacefully. While they're eating, Alice gets a shiver down her spine, which causes Tansu to react and look around. Ken notices, and he feels it too. From the passing crowd, a boy separates and takes a seat at their table, wearing a hood up and his entire face wrapped in balaclava. Although I did go and change that in my head to he actually has a rabbit mask that he made and is wearing, which has like a big smile on it with weird eyes, and he's looking through the eyes, because like that was a whole thing that Felix made because of Moxie the rabbit from his sister. So he made this weird pink bunny mask, or maybe white bunny mask. Yeah. Wrapped in, so his entire face is wrapped in balaclava, though he moved with uninhibited precision. Because his face would be wrapped because he's fucking pale. He's a Tuffle. So Ken gives him a flat stare, sensing immediately that it's Tuffle energy. Tansu stares clueless while Alice is snickering to herself inside, stating, "You gotta be kidding me." Ken asks, "Can we help you?" To which the obscured boy speaks directly to Alice, saying it's been quite a long time since they last spoke. Alice's eyes flare up behind Tansu's. Indeed, it has. Behind the fabric, Tansu can see a faint purple globe match her own eyes and gets a feeling of dread. Tansu asks worriedly who this is. Alice says there's no reason to hide his face here. He replies, "Can't blame me for it. It's not so easy to move around in daylight now that he's whole," as he starts unwrapping the folds and keeping the hood up. He takes it down and places the cloth on the table, revealing himself to be Destro. Alice asks how he survived, considering Lust boasted about finishing him off. Checked the canon to make sure I did actually have her say that and I didn't change it. He scoffs, saying after their fight he was able to recover and roll a few heads. Lust eventually found him, Lyomic eventually found him, but the two were at a stalemate. She bailed and never saw him again. He said after that, "I spent some time hunting other Tuffle and grew stronger, shedding Felix from his body. After Sin had died, everything went to hell. Then your energy reappeared and I made one last effort to find you. Almost didn't make it too. My anima was nearly shattered when suddenly it was repaired like every time before." Alice says because because at this point Alice's anima would still be fragile. Like there's no anima was permanently fixed. Like Ken's wouldn't be permanently fixed. Chrism still had the father gem to make sure that she was keeping up with repairing it, so Magro wouldn't die, so Alice wouldn't die. So instead, I did away with that and just had it so Magro figured out how to mend the anima at the cost of restricting that they can't gain power from that anymore. So yeah, at this point, they still had to have it repaired. So he just got lucky that Chrism repaired it. Alice asks, so now you're here, and I have one guess why. He smirks and says they have unfinished business. Too bad Kimberly can't be here. He really loved the way her skin felt, because remember, he's a fucking sex fiend. Tansu is annoyed and confused by him and gets snarky. Destro finds it funny and says he recognized her from Kim's thoughts, saying Felix dreamt about her face while pleasuring himself. Sorry, guys. I had to keep his character disgusting. This gets her heated enough to make it easier for Alice to take over. Ken objects to their scuffle, but Alice says to stay out of it. Ken sighs and says that he won't let her die here. If she can't beat him, he'll step in. Alice says not to worry. His power will be mine. The two fight. I don't know where they fight, if they're fighting on the fucking street. The two fight, and at first it seems like they're evenly matched. Alice says this is only because Tansu and her don't have a good flow yet, and her heart isn't in the fight. The fight causes the public to scatter. Okay, so it is like on the sidewalk. And also, yeah, I didn't include a lot of this too because like it just ruined the flow of like we just met a council member. Now we're having lunch and fighting Destro. It's just like stuff that I wanted to include, just random ideas that like, yeah, this is going. But then as I started writing, I'm like, no, none of this works. None of this makes any. It makes sense. It can make sense, but like none of this shit is as important as what I'm trying to do. So obviously I didn't do it. Alice pushes her power and is able to kill Destro and claim his power before the police show up, which again is a different way because originally Destro was supposed to join their team. So Destro was originally supposed to join their team and then betray them, hoping that Javolt would be like, oh, cool, this dude is on my side, but she's like, he betrays them and goes, haha, I'm gonna help her instead because you guys are dumb. And then Javolt's just like, you're dead, fuck you. And they're like, oh no, who could have saw that coming? And but instead, I wanted Alice to kill Destro so she could get a little bit more power to be a little bit more believable with her being able to fight Javolt a little bit. But I didn't do that. So kills Destro, claims the power before the police show up. However, Ken goes to congratulate her and freezes, looking past and seeing Javolt behind her. She looks pleased, brandishing her sword as the world turns gray. All other sound is muted, and everything pauses around them. Javolt blitzes Alice, who is already amped, and she deflects the sword with her claws. She's a little tired though, and is sluggish to react. Suffering a few heavy blows before Magro can transform, Alice gets thrown across the street and slams into a brick building, leaving an impact dent in the wall and crumbling to the sidewalk. Javalt slowly approaches Magro and points the blade at him, saying, "You made a lot of noise." Ken doesn't back down, but is trembling. She says, "I did not have permission to kill you before, but that has since changed." So in this context, Javalt went back and was like, "Dog, can I kill these people? They're kind of in the way." And they went, "As you wish." And then she came back like, "Cool, I can kill them. You are all targets, and if you do not cooperate, I will slaughter you without mercy." Macro smirks, saying, "Well, I won't make it easy for you." She's then struck by a floating orb of energy in the back of the head. This staggers her forward into him, where he spawns a few more on the tips of his fingers, jabbing them into her chest, each exploding on impact. She takes his wrist in her hand and sighs, bored, punching him in the gut and demanding information. So yeah, this is all completely out of order from where I was, because this street fight doesn't happen till way later, and the context is way different. That the street fight is the last fight, so yeah. I mean, this is nearing the end too, but like I covered so much other stuff in between. But while Ken fights Javalt and holds his own, Alice notices that she appears to not be trying, just testing him. She waits for an opening and attacks, but misses and is harshly cast to the side, narrowly avoiding the sword to her throat. This is before before I decided that the sword Respada would be imbued with the power to take energy with cuts. So it's just a sword at this point. I don't know if that changes. Ken gets annoyed at her shouting, "Stay out of it." Alice starts to use some new abilities, adding onto her claw phase move. As she fights, her body heats up with energy and sweat starts to steam off of her. She uses a psychic move that was basically taken from Lyomic, where she attacks Javalt's mind, or she tries to. In the span of a real-world 5 seconds, Alice and Tonto experience flashbacks of the first cataclysm and the birth of the Council. The smog monster consuming the earth and the one meeting it as an equal, so the smog monster being Monday. Commandante. Alice, I still don't like that name, but it's canon. I want to think of a different name. A lot of reasons that characters have multiple different names that they go by, different monikers, is because I write the first name, it becomes canon because it's already in the book, and then I decide later I don't really like it that much, and so I write in a reason for why they have a different name. I don't like Monday Commandante that much, and I don't even remember what it translates into. I do not remember, but either way. So Alice, recognizing the tiny difference in power, she kicks him out and furiously jabs a finger at her. "You." She jabs harshly, just like, "You went in my brain." In those 5 seconds, Macro ascends and creates his energy daggers, landing a deep slash across her chest, followed up by a punch which knocks her back. But she's quick to recover and gets a few good hits on both of them. Macro is severely injured soon after by the sword piercing his chest. He grips the sword tight while it's penetrating him and surrounds his hand in demonic energy to keep it in place. Alice then jabs her claws in the ground and brings 10 up around her, containing her in a cage like a trap. He then says, "Just try and hold on, Ken, it's gonna get rough." The energy around them starts building, the heat in the air rising as deformed waves start to ripple. In a small dome that surrounds the two of them, black and purple mist leaks out from around her claws, charring the ground, melting a newspaper stand, and singeing Javalt's flesh, who starts to groan in pain. Macro's teeth are grit, but a shrill cry can be heard coming from within his body. Ken is suffering, begging to stop. He winces, asking for him to hold on a little longer, but Ken's voice goes quiet and Javalt breaks free, phasing away into the air and disappearing. Macro falls to one knee, reverting to his base form and panting. Alice glares at him, retracting her claws. He jerks his palm forward and summons a black door. Alice shoulders his weight, and they both walk through. Chrism sees them return in this condition and understands that they were discovered. They just wanted lunch. Macro starts crying, saying Ken is dead. Alice sees this and says, "I didn't know Tuffle can cry." Oh, man. We are almost done. So, Part 5. At this point, Chrism starts to show emotion. Composure wavering, she flinches and punches a desk nearby. After she cools down, she consoles Macro. He says he'll be okay when this is all over. He turns to Tansu and asks if she is ready to try again. She says yes, her resolve strengthening now that she is this far in and committed. Viewing the Tuffle as something more than heartless monsters as she believed Alice to be. Tansu says they all need to rest, but Chrism says there's no time. Macro agrees. Chrism takes the ditch orb and they both go into it, wavering from the fight. Macro drags his feet over to the beds and has Tansu lie down once again. She does, and Macro tells her that if it doesn't work, don't beat yourself up over it. She may be too far gone. They can still transfer Alice out of her body, and after that, they will find a way to stabilize her soul. Tansu is quiet at first, then says it will work. And just before being submerged, she tells Macro that she's sorry about Ken. He nods and smiles and says he appreciates it. Back inside the ditch, she notes how things feel different than before. Before it felt alive, like the walls were squirming and solid. Now she could see the walls and doorways, but they all felt like illusions, somewhat transparent and black matte barriers behind them. Every step she takes produced no noise, and her breaths felt stopped by some invisible sheet wrapped tightly around her. Looking down at her hand and arm, she can see her body has some type of aura around it, almost glowing but not quite radiant. Like her skin and clothes were a cutout layer of a brighter contrast on top of this blackened realm. As she walks, the ground starts to soak with water. Notice when her feet grow cold and the splashing of each step soaks her ankles. She wanders, pressing on various doors, led astray by false intuition. The longer she takes, the more the water begins to rise. As it reaches her shins, she starts to panic and move faster, kicking up thick pond water and frantically pushing on doors. Finally, one opens, and from the mysterious closet spawns a black shadowed tentacle. Ignore that. Ones she recognizes as sins. They shoot out from the room and pin her to the opposite wall. She shrieks, but the noise doesn't travel far. Lifted up off the ground, she struggles as the limbs coil around her. Suddenly, her body emits a purple glow that causes the tentacles to break away and retract back into the room. She falls into the water, which is now knee-high, and gets to her feet. Looking at her arm, she sees the white skin fade back to her own. She says thank you to Alice and then runs down the hall. So I guess in this context, Alice was like, oh no, you're in trouble, take some energy, and helps her. She finds the door by means of some internal guidance. The door is ajar and creaks as she opens it. The water is also inside, refracting light from the barely burning candle on the table as it was before. Kim is sitting there back to the door and staring at the light. Her blackened outline is hardly distinguishable from the black room she sat in, though a pale, blurry reflection of her face in the water shuffles from her movements. Tansu goes to speak but stops and then steps into the room entirely. The pulsating of her soul alerts Kim, though she doesn't say anything. Instead, Kim's hair starts to rise off of her shoulders. A purplish-blue glow rises off her skin and surprises Tansu. Tansu speaks Kimmy. Not noticeable, her head tilts upward. She speaks, please, just let it end. Such deep sorrow in her voice. Tansu says, I came back to save you. Kim, look at me. She gets upset. Kim's head lowers again, whispers, I know that voice. The water stirs. Tansu? Happily tearing, she steps again. Yes, it's me. Turn around. The water rises further, consuming the candle entirely. Everything goes dark, deathly silent. For a moment, she isn't sure if she's alive. She can't see, feel, or hear anything. A low gurgling rises from the water up to her waist. Growing louder and louder until the sound was all-consuming. Then it suddenly stops, and her voice reaches from the other end of the room. Tansu? Kim's body suddenly emits a blue and purple light. She's standing, facing Tansu with hollow light in her eyes. Tansu stares in disbelief, unable to say anything or move. I know immediately that this was like the first draft version of this. This is just like me getting from point A to point B, and I'll figure out all the in-between and whatever have you later. Kim, is that really you? It's me. No one has ever come back. Or Kim says, is that really you? Tansu says, it's me. Kim says, no one has ever come back. No one, she explains sorrowfully. I'm real and I came back to take you home. She extends her hand. Take my hand, hurry. She's hesitant at first, but slowly reaches out and their hands touch, igniting the sigil, and Kim's body starts to turn to glitter, breaking down to a fine dust and siphoning into the palm of her hand. After they get Kim out and the transfer for Alice is complete, Tansu and Kim are sitting within her mind at the edge of her bed at home. Talking. Tansu tries to explain what happened after she died, and Kim talks about what happened after she left and why Kim had to send her away. Then Tansu says, come on, there's someone else who's waiting to see you, and now all this, like, completely different. I was gonna have this happen at the 3/4 point in the story, and decided that, like, it made things way too complicated to have Kim and Tansu, Alice, Magro, Chrism, and Juvalt all at once. I'm like, that's way too much going on, and way too much that Kim has to be caught up with, way too much context, way too much shit, just like, it's just a mess. So I decided to save this thing for the end. When they reunite and Tantu opens her eyes to the real world, she smiles, sitting up to see Alice in her own body sitting up as well. She looks like original Alice, but without the stitches, though the body has scars on it. Alice and Kim share a telepathic conversation. Macro pulls them out of the ditch with joy in his heart, still weak from the fight, only to spawn in Sin's chamber to see Chrism in a struggle with Javal. So they're just fighting in the chamber. She gets thwacked to the side, and Javal addresses them, saying, "So this is where you were hiding." Then blitzes Macro, only to be stopped by a fully powered Alice. She pushes Javal back, and Chrism joins the three shoulders aligned. Macro asks, "What the hell? How did she find us?" And Chrism says it was only a matter of time. Chrism tells the two to distract her, so Alice and Macro rush, but Javalt is just giddy and amused by their team effort. When Chrism is ready, she slaps a spell on the ground, which ejects them out of this dimension. They are taken to the orphanage where Ken was raised and are standing in the forest with the building in the background. Macro asks, while breaking away from the fight, why does she bring them here? And she says they needed breathing room, and this is the first place she thought of. Javalt expresses annoyance and says no more dimension hopping, and she casts a spell that creates a dome around them, locking them here. Chrism scoffs in frustration, saying she was hoping to send Kim and Tansu away, which obviously wouldn't make sense because then we don't really have a window into what's happening, which is why they were forced to stay, but just like, I couldn't have done that, so. Javalt attacks Chrism. Macro ascends, and he and Alice fight Javalt, but Alice cannot even cut her with her claws, swiping only to have them stop against her skin. Eventually, Alice ascends as well, and the three fight while Tansu watches, and Kim gets pissed since she can't do anything to help, and she's still a bit lost in what's going on. Yeah, it is just, like I said before, just too much. But too many characters in one scene. There'd be too much like Tansu talking to Kim, Kim with her dialogue, Kim just asking questions the whole time, and trying to like choreograph the fight between everyone, just way too much. So having Kim being around at this point, just it would work fine if it was like a show, like an anime or something. We could have all that kind of stuff happening. But when it comes to writing, it's just too bloated, too complicated, and not too much. So Alice and Macro get beat down, and Chrism is the only one left standing. Javalt, growing tired and having taken damage from their ascended forms, acknowledges Tansu as the one they're protecting, so she throws the sword at her, which ends up piercing her gut and pinning her to a tree. Brutal. Chrism screams, "No!" and Tansu's torso buckles forward, blood draining down her legs. Chrism enrages, screaming that this is not how it will end. Her wings shoot out and her body is covered with razor feathers. She is able to hold her own against Javalt, but is stricken down. Her body is at its limits, with volatile power swirling inside her. Javalt recalls her sword out of Tansu's gut, which drops her to the forest floor. She holds it to Chrism's head, who is lying on her side, facing Alice 20 feet away. Alice is struggling to stand and has her eyes locked to Chrism. Javalt gives a speech that they will reclaim her power. Everyone here will die, and the world will undergo a new cataclysm. So, yeah, the perfect balance will be restored. Yeah, so this was, again, all before. That was like the fear that Mundy was projecting, whereas their actual intent wasn't to do Cataclysm. It would be as a last resort in the actual canon. But yeah, they weren't planning on doing that. But in this story, the original plan was, yeah, that's what they're trying to do, because this is before I had the idea of them being unaware of what was happening, because like when Sin was on Earth and them all being separate between dimensions, they were locked in like a stasis, and they have no idea what was going on. So with this context, they had an idea of what was going on generally. So as she's saying all this, Tansu's body moves without her will, and she looks down at the wound, one eye green, the other blue, and the wound starts to heal. Chrism looks to Alice and nods. Alice understands, and when Chrism's eyes flash yellow, Alice stabs her nails into the ground, which emerge right through Chrism's skull, killing her. So that was pretty much always the plan. Tansu gets on her feet, acknowledging that Kim healed her somehow, and as soon as she entered the ditch, the other fragments of her soul joined her, but had already been corrupted, meaning Kim is now more Tuffle than she ever was before, and witnesses the light fade from Chrism's eyes. All goes silent. Javalt glares at Alice with a disturbed face as she retracts her claws and gets on her feet. Eyes closed. Javalt puffs her chest and watches Alice rise. The wounds on her body heal near instantly, and some cosmetic changes start to occur. Exhaling slowly, her eyes open to reveal black eyeballs, white irises, and an outer ring of purple. In the center of her chest, the anima pushes out of the skin and black-rooted lines crawl up her neck and connect to her eyes. I was definitely trying to figure out some kind of a cool design, but and also the more cool designs I thought of, the more I was like, it has to make sense in the lore. I can't just say this happened because it does. I need to make it make sense. Javalt claims it's impossible. Divine power would never accept a murderous fiend like you. Macro looks at Javalt and starts to weakly laugh. He says she's wrong. Alice's soul is clean. On cue, her wings erupt from her back and are gleaming white. Electricity shoots out from her skin with an expulsion of raw power. Javalt doesn't take this seriously and fights, but Alice is able to beat her down with ease, bringing her to her knees in less than a minute. That's when the rest of the council show up. When they manage to defeat Javalt after Chrism is dead and Alice is basically God. So this is me again, just writing notes. The other two council members show up, which surprises Javalt. They should not be able to share the same space without disrupting the planet. But she sees they have certain amulets around their necks which suppress their power. This is before I had like the limiter armbands and limiter jewelry and stuff. So this was like amulets, I guess. That was a temporary, just like, they need something. What can it be? Amulets, I guess, for now, just to get me to where I need to go, and I'll figure it out later. That's how a lot of it goes, is I need to get here. Amulets, sure, and then I'll fix it later. Alice notes that because they are suppressed right now, she could kill them easily. They want to take Chrism's power back so they can, this is just me making notes. They want their motives are they want to take Chrism's power back so they can reset the energies in the world as the One did way back then. Alice refuses, saying wiping the slate clean will negate everything I fought for. These humans are weak, simplistic fools, but I don't believe they deserve total annihilation. To which they respond, it's not annihilation, it's rebirth. The world has gone wrong in so many ways that the only chance at balance is to start anew. Alice laughs. Now that she has his power, she knows of Sin's and Chrism's pasts, and she says, you don't get it at all. Maybe you think Sin abandoned your cause because that tiny particle of evil corrupted him. No, the fact that the particle exists means there can never be true balance. Evil won, it will always win. It's fate. The world is chaos, and your perfect balance is a lie. Sorry, did I had a splinter in my hand for a second? I don't. It's just scab. So Alice plans on going on to be the defender, unbound by her archaic laws to keep the world turning, working along both sides for as close to harmony as they can get, because now the seal the council originally set in place to lock their powers upon unauthorized killings does not exist in her. It was destroyed by the imbalance in Chrism. They ask her why a filth artificial demon would do this. Tell me why, you filth artificial demon. Why would you do this? She explains that she was born for blood, but there's something more to it all. Kim made her this way. After the final fight, when Ken helps Tansu return home, she goes inside, exhausted, to find her mom asleep on the couch with the TV playing. She reunites with her mom and apologizes, says she had to get away and figure some things out. She sleeps and wakes up. Kim greets her. She calls Joey, and he rushes over. So yeah, Tansu sleeps, wakes up. Kim greets Tansu. Tansu calls Joey, and he rushes over. After Alice steps away, and then this is apparently right there, there's not much after, so I didn't have a plan for what was going to happen after that. Joey's coming over, and they're going to, like, divulge what happened to them, I guess. After Alice steps away and joins the council to discuss what to do, she returns a while later after Tansu returns home. So Alice leaves, and then she returns later for Tansu. Alice visits her and wants to speak with Kim. She shows up in a cloak and a half mask, hair in a ponytail, and pulled back with her fringe pulled to the side. Kim notes all the changes. So this is like time later. Kim says she doesn't understand how she's able to use the divine power. Kel wasn't evil. Alice says, back then, I had a feeling about him, something on his breath that irked me in a way I couldn't put into words. Taking his essence, I found the truth buried. And then at the end, we get that explanation that Kel was a sex freak, a pedophile. He loved his children just a bit too much. It's just a little bit of... Listen. Hold on a second. She tells Kim and Tansu her thanks and what it's all meant to her. They ask what she'll do. She says there's a lot to control and she will return when it's quieter. I want to explain the Kel thing real quick, because like I don't really need to explain it. It is kind of... It's the one thing... One of the biggest things in the story I wish I had a better reasoning for. And kind of wrote myself into a corner with that and had to make his character a lot worse. Kel was never meant to be like that. But as I got to this point where I started to develop this idea of like Alice is the only one that could take the divine power because her anima is the least bit dirty compared to all the others. Like Magcrow had slaughtered so many people when he was first born, and whatever. And Alice had only killed Alex, and he deserved it at the time. You know, it was a just killing, so her soul wasn't completely tarnished. And then she didn't kill Stacy, but she did manage to kill Kel. I needed her to kill more than just Alex because there's a whole balance of Kim always losing. Like it's not like she loses to Destro. She's always losing. Well, she's always losing to her dad. She's always losing to Stacy. She loses to Destro. She basically loses to Lyomic, except she does tap into. Sorry, get the burps again. I just ate food and stuff. She tapped into Nothing's power and fought back against Lyomic. And if Alice hadn't shown up, she might have been able to drive her out. But she loses all these things, and she loses to Sin. She loses like almost every fight she's in, basically. And so like I needed her to be able to, with her losing so much, and purposefully so, she needed to maintain her humanity. Them losing so much allowed Kim to continue to survive longer and to keep her head clear. So but with them killing Kel, there needed to be something behind it. Like I didn't want to kill Stacy, but there needed to be like, oh no, like Alice is capable of doing this and so easily, and this is how evil Alice can be. She just fucking sliced his throat open and was about to kill pretty much whoever she could in the school until Kim was able to take back her body. But luckily Macro stopped him. Like Alice, make no mistake, Alice was about to go on a fucking rampage. Every kill would have fueled the next one and the next one and the next one. So, but because she killed Kel and then was stopped after that, she got that little bit of extra power, and the implications of it all weighed on Kim. So she needed all that for the growth. They both needed all that. But in order to keep her soul as clean as possible for this future plot, writing myself into a corner, I had to retcon a little bit and go back and add some edits to where Kel was a pervert sex offender, because I couldn't have him like, yeah, he could have been abusive or something, and like that could have worked, but there needed to be something different. And I didn't really have many other ideas of what he could do, but it's like, yeah, he's a teacher, he's a little bit too nice, so we'll just make him like molested his kids and was trying to be creepy with some of the teenage girl classmates, kind of thing. We'll just put that in there, not to make light of it, but just like I needed him to have something just evil in him that justified his death after the fact, because I wrote myself into that corner. So that's like one of the biggest things I wish I could have done better or handled differently, but I couldn't change that entire thing. So I needed to keep that, but I need to have a reason, and it just feels shoehorned in, and it feels a little insensitive the way I did it, but it's like also it's a small plot point, and it it gets us to where we need to go. So yeah. So Kel was never supposed to have that, but I had to make him that because to make the rest of this plot work. It's not like I needed that, but I needed Alice to be as clean as possible, as justified in the two killings that she did as possible, so it was more believable that she could wield that power. Not perfectly, she still problems, but like she's able to have it. So there's not as many hooks for Mundy to grab onto with Alice. It has to reach a little bit harder. So yeah, that was a long video, and there's not a lot of editing that's going to be happening. So if you made it, I mean, that's like almost, actually it's probably over an hour at this point. So that was the original blueprint for book 2. That's where I started, that's what I put in the document, and then as I went, and it became what it is. A lot changed. A lot of the pacing changed. A lot was cut, and a lot was shifted around. A lot was added. And the ending, I know the ending to book 2, we're not going to like get into it, but the ending as it is canonically was a pretty somewhat abrupt ending. I know when me and Dylan were reading it, he's like, well, that just like wrapped up. Like we were fighting, and like the fighting was going on, and it was good, and then it kind of like came to a close, and then it's like the fight just ended. And I'm like, yeah, because sometimes that's how things just happen. we had a lot of big dramatic moments, like Chrism almost lost control, Alice killed Chrism, and then, Javald gets stopped from fighting Divine Alice when another council member shows up. So, like, a lot of stuff happens, but it just kind of feels like everything just kind of fell at once and just kind of like the dust settled all at once kind of thing. And that's what I wanted it to be, because sometimes that's just kind of how things happen. I didn't want to make it into an unnecessarily grandiose giant thing where the world cracks in half, but Alice pulls it back together, like, whatever. But, like, this was definitely a much different ending than we saw. A lot of the same themes, but the way we got there, the steps we took, there was staggered a lot, and hopefully you can see how it evolved to where it got, and how I felt the need to shuffle some things around, and how the New York lunch scene was pointless just because I wanted new scenery and I needed a way to introduce Destro back into the story. And again, how it was going to go with Destro was he was going to join them and betray them and then die from Javal, because she's like, ew, gross, and just kills him. So, yeah, anyway, I'm not going to keep babbling because I can go on forever and I've already kept you long enough. So, if you made it to the end, well, leave a like. In classic Chris fashion, if you made it to the end, well, this is actually my main channel thing, so I guess it'll apply. It's still me. Comment boobs if you made it to the end. It's been a thing for like 6 years. So, oh, yeah. Bye bye.